When you think about the study of history, what's the first thing that comes to mind? For a lot of us, it's probably kings, queens, and major wars. But history is so much more than just a timeline of big events. It's a massive field of study, and you can look at it through all these different lenses. In this explainer, we're going to zoom in on one of the most important of those lenses, social history. So, let's get started.
So, let's start with a really basic, but really important question. What does it actually mean to study history? Are we just trying to memorize dates and names? Or is the work of a historian something deeper, something more complex? You see, the real scope of history goes way beyond those great events we often learn about in school. It's about trying to understand the entire fabric of past societies. Let's dig into what that actually means. Modern historical research is less about just listing what happened, and more about asking why and how. It dives deep into the complex machinery of past societies. We're talking about their social systems, their cultural practices, and the everyday lived experiences of the people within them. It really treats history as this ongoing investigation into how humanity has related to the world over time.
Now, this incredibly wide field has a lot of different subdisciplines. The one we're really going to focus on today is social history. So, what is it exactly?
Well, if we look at the academic definition, social history is a subdiscipline that takes society itself as its main subject. What this means is that it's not just looking at the rulers or the political decisions. Instead, it's looking at the entire social organism, its processes, its structures, and how ordinary life gets reflected in the historical record.
And one of the key things about this approach is that it's incredibly interdisciplinary. It doesn't just stay in its own lane. As this source material shows us, social historians are constantly borrowing ideas and methods from other fields, like sociology, economics, and demography, all to build a much richer, fuller picture of the past.
Now, to put it a bit more simply, you'll often hear social history described in a couple of ways, as the history of the people, or as history from below. And what's so powerful about these phrases is that they perfectly capture the shift in perspective. It's a very deliberate move away from looking at things from the top down.
So, you might be wondering, where did this whole approach come from? Well, social history didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It actually emerged as a direct reaction to the traditional way of writing and thinking about history.
The field really started to take shape right around the middle of the 20th century. A growing number of historians back then were starting to feel that the existing methods were just too narrow. They felt that traditional history was failing to capture the experiences of the vast majority of people who've ever lived. And this comparison here just lays it out so clearly. On the left, you've got traditional history. It's focused on the elites, the so-called great men, political events, and a very top-down narrative. But then on the right, you see how social history just flipped that whole model on its head. It argued that to really understand the past, you have to start from the bottom up. You have to look at the lives of ordinary people and the social and economic forces that truly shape their world.
Okay, so now that we understand its origins, let's get into the substance of social history. What do social historians actually study, and who are some of the key thinkers that really shaped this field?
The range of topics here is just incredibly broad. I mean, social historians ask questions about, well, pretty much everything. How did class structures actually work? What was the nature of work and inequality? How have our concepts of race and gender evolved over time? They look at family life, popular culture, and even private behaviors, all in an effort to construct a complete history of society.
This quote, which reflects the work of the hugely influential historian E.P. Thompson, really gets to the absolute heart of the mission. The idea is to recenter history on the lived experiences of the working class, of women, of all the groups who are traditionally ignored. It's about trying to see the world from their point of view.
The field is also full of these really diverse theoretical approaches. For instance, you have Michel Foucault, who looked at how power works in everyday institutions like prisons or hospitals. You have the famous Annales School in France, which shifted the focus to long-term societal changes instead of just short-term political events. And then you have scholars like Peter Burke, who have shown us how popular culture, things like songs and festivals, can actually reveal a society's deepest values.
So, what's the ultimate impact of all this? Let's wrap things up by summarizing how social history has fundamentally broadened the entire scope of historical inquiry. This is so important. The impact of social history wasn't just in changing what historians study, but also how they study it. Think about it for a second. Ordinary people don't often leave behind a huge trail of written records. So, to get at their lives, social historians had to pioneer new methods, like oral history, and they had to apply theories from other social sciences to make sense of new kinds of evidence.
So, the crucial point, the real takeaway here is this. By including the stories of workers, families, women, and marginalized groups, social history doesn't just add a few more facts to our knowledge, it creates a fundamentally more complete, more accurate, and more nuanced understanding of the past. It shows us that history was made by everyone, not just by a handful of people at the top. And that really leaves us with a final thought to consider. By shifting our gaze and learning how to study the lives of ordinary people in the past, what new and essential questions does that force us to ask about power,
Generate by AI.
inequality, and
Generate by
culture in
AI.
our own society today?